I want to talk about the teams at this point going into Week 15 that could win the Super Bowl. The Colts are probably out of the playoff race. Technically, there's a way for them to still get in. It's a bit weird. It's a bit strange. I believe that they'd have to win out, and the Chargers would have to go 2-1. And the Chargers have the Broncos coming up, which is huge. Now suddenly the Colts want the Broncos to win. And then they play, I believe it's the Raiders and maybe the Titans. It's someone bad. It's two bad teams, two easy games. So the Chargers should be able to pick up an easy win. But we need to go 3-0, and we need the Chargers to lose once or twice, I believe, which is just probably not going to happen because, again, even if they lose the Broncos, they'll win one or two of those last couple games. But regardless, there's a way for the Colts to find their way in. I don't think it's going to happen because I think the Chargers are just going to win. They have the Broncos at home too. So the Colts are probably out. But there's 4 teams in the NFL that have separated themselves from the pack. The 4 teams at the top that are most likely to go to and win the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs are the first one I want to mention. They are, I believe, the team with the best record in the NFL at this time. There's some fraud allegations with the Chiefs, right? They've won a lot of close games. They lost to the Bills, one of their only true tough tests. Winning games late is a strength, but is it sustainable? And this is the question about the Chiefs. Are they lucky or are they good in crunch time? And this is something we talked about with Nebraska football in the past, where Scott Frost, was like 3-9, but every single game was one possession, regardless of who they played. Kansas City's like that, except they're winning, right? They're winning these close games. Are they lucky or are they good in crunch time? And is that sustainable? If it's luck, it's not sustainable because they played the Bills and they lost, right? And they'll play teams like the Bills and probably the Bills again in the playoffs and maybe will lose again. If they're just good in crunch time, that's a strength for the Chiefs, right? And that's part of the reason why they're 12-1 at this point and moving forward and ascending and potentially going to be the 1 seed in the AFC despite their loss to Buffalo. Are they lucky or are they just good in crunch time? We'll find out over the course of the rest of the season, and truly we'll find out in the playoffs when they play someone good who's putting on their best show in a win-or-go-home, do-or-die game. The Bills are the next team that have separated themselves from the pack. They're incredible. They're playing their best football despite their loss to the Rams a couple weekends ago, and this win over the Lions was huge, right? This win over the Lions was very encouraging. Josh Allen is an MVP candidate. They can win it all despite losing some pieces. Lost Stephon Diggs, bring in Keon Coleman, right? The Bills roster looks a little bit different. This core roster talent looks a little bit different. Bills are great, and Josh Allen is probably going to be MVP, and the Bills may very well be the best team in the AFC, even if the Chiefs end up with the best record. They just beat the Lions on the road, too, and the Lions were putting on a blackout show for that. Very encouraging win for the Bills. The Bills are legit. Bills might be the best team in the AFC. They might be better than the Chiefs. They did beat the Chiefs, and we'll find out in the playoffs if they can make that happen again. We know how good the Chiefs have been against the Bills in the playoffs and really against the Bills across the board. This year might be different. The Bills have separated themselves from the pack. They could be Super Bowl contenders. They are Super Bowl contenders, and they could very well win it this year. The Lions, I would have considered the best team in the league until they lost to the Bills at home. They've overwhelmed offenses with their pass rush, even without Aiden Hutchinson. Now he's back. It may very well be their championship to lose. That's what I was saying prior to that loss to the Bills. I think the Bills and the Lions are the two best teams in the league, and I think that Super Bowl would be a thrill, and I know that because we watched the game last weekend and saw how much fun that was. The Eagles are the last team that I feel separated themselves from the pack, and I feel that they are the weakest one. I don't think the Chiefs are bad. I don't think the Chiefs are overrated. Well, maybe they're overrated, but I don't think that they are. I don't think they're complete frauds. I think they're good in crunch time. And I think Patrick Mahomes is clutch. And I think that team is clutch. And they have the roster talent to win big games against good teams late, right? And if that means they play down to their competition as well, that's fine. But they're beating good teams too. And I think that the Chiefs, they're beating great teams as well. Only loss being to the Bills, I think, is indicative of their ability to win games. And I think in the playoffs, that's going to allow them to win games consistently until they play another team like this, whether it's the Bills, the Lions, or the Eagles. Until they play a team like that, most likely they'll be winning at home, and they'll continue to win at home until they run into a more difficult challenge. The Eagles, though, they're sneaky successful across the board. Saquon has been awesome coming over from the Giants. They could nab a win over the Lions, right, in the playoffs, or they could just clean up the mess. If the Lions get upset, if the Lions get tasked with someone like the Vikings, and this is a very, very likely scenario, honestly, where let's say the Lions are the 1 seed, right, and the Vikings are the 5, or the Packers are the 6. And it's with two teams in the NFC North being in the wild card round, right? Since they reseed, and since the Vikings would be the 5 and the Packers would be the 6, theoretically, right? It's very likely that one of those teams pulls off an upset against a weaker division champion, and because they'd be the lower seed, it's also very likely that they then get reseeded to go play the Lions, or if the Vikings, the 5 seed, win, they just straight up play the Lions, right? And then in a divisional game, right, against a division rival in the divisional rounds, maybe that's a spot where the Lions get upset, and then the Eagles clean up the mess. They already beat the Packers earlier in the year. Absolutely, I could see that being the case where the Eagles just clean up the mess. The Lions get upset by a division rival, and the Eagles clean up the mess and go to the Super Bowl. That's how they could get there if they don't beat the Lions themselves. The Eagles are capable of both. Those 4 teams, I think, are really the most likely to win the Super Bowl, and I think the Super Bowl champion will be one of them. The Chiefs, the Bills, the Lions, and the Eagles. But then there's a few outside contenders, right? There's a few more teams that could potentially flash in the pan and have success in the postseason. The Steelers. They're in a spot where Russell Wilson is not done yet, right? We thought his career was over. He leaves the Seahawks, leaves Pete Carroll, right? Goes to the Broncos. He was bad. The team was bad. Mike Tomlin is finally soaring. He's finally found a quarterback he gels well with and works well with. Russell Wilson is in the perfect spot for him. Mike Tomlin is in the perfect spot. He's one of the best coaches in the league. In my opinion, he is the best, honestly, at least in terms of long-term success. And he's got a team that's currently leading the division, and they do have a very tough final 3 games. They'll probably be a wild card team. I think the Ravens will surpass them. They play, I believe, this weekend in a massive game. Steelers are outside contenders. They could pull off some upsets. They could pull off some wins. For a long time, we said that the Steelers were good, but they haven't played any division games yet, and they're frauds because of that. They haven't played the Ravens, Bengals, or Browns yet, and once they do, we're going to find out that the Steelers really aren't all they're chalked up to be. And then they started winning those division games, and they continue to be in lead of the division. They continue to be in those top 4 seeds there, I believe, at the 3 at the moment. I personally believe the Ravens will surpass them. I think the Ravens will win the division and have a home playoff game, and the Steelers will go on the road, maybe to play the Ravens. But the Steelers could win at least 1, maybe 2 playoff games. They can beat good teams. Russell Wilson's not done yet. Mike Tomlin is finally succeeding at the level that he deserves to. They could make some noise, especially if they have 1 or 2 home playoff games across the board. Next team, also from the AFC North, the Ravens, right? They're still talented. They're still very talented with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and they've been sort of forgotten, right? I believe they have 5 losses. They're 8-5. They're a wild card team, and once they started racking up those losses and falling out of the top 4, they've been forgotten about. But the Ravens are one of the Ravens could just straight up win the Super Bowl, and they've done it before as a wild card team where they come out of nowhere and win a couple playoff games on the road, go to the Super Bowl, and then at that point all bets are off. They can go on the road and win. They're known to compete with top contenders. They're known to give some of these top teams a real difficult test. They did it last year in the AFC Championship game. They could get back there and they could win it this time, especially because we don't know if the Chiefs are fully cemented at the top of the standings. Unless the Ravens run into the Bills, and even if they run into the Bills, I feel like they could beat anyone at home and potentially on the road as well. The Ravens are a team that can represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, and I would not be surprised at all, especially if they get some favorable matchups early. It's a great team, and people are forgetting about them. Don't forget about the Baltimore Ravens. As far as the NFC goes, we got 2 NFC North teams. So the North is just great. Now that I realize both of these teams in the outside contender spot are AFC North and NFC North teams. The Vikings, they're 10-2, I believe 11-2 now. They're a wild card team, shockingly, because the Lions are just 1 game better, right? They'll likely have an easy first-round game. They'll likely go on the road and play the Falcons or the Buccaneers or the Rams or the Seahawks, someone like that. And that's difficult on the road, but the Vikings will be able to handle it. Who knows how far they can go after that? Because, as I said, the Vikings could have a spot where they play a weak division champion, and then they play the Lions in a divisional game, or maybe the Eagles, a team that's definitely prone to being upset. Vikings could make some noise. They could find themselves in the NFC Championship game. And whether they're playing the Lions or the Eagles or anyone else, the Vikings can beat anyone. They have beaten most teams. They could go to the Super Bowl. And once you get there, especially if you're a team like the Vikings, all bets are off. Watch out for the Vikings. They could low-key win the Super Bowl this year, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. Packers are a sneaky double-digit winning team in a loaded NFC North. They could play a playoff spoiler as well. They could go on the road, beat the Buccaneers, and then potentially, again, divisional opponent against the Lions. So the Lions are almost destined to play the Vikings or Packers if they win, right? Because I doubt the 7-seed Commanders, or whoever's going to fill that 7-seed, I doubt that they're going to spring an upset. Lions are almost destined for a divisional rivalry game in the divisional rounds. They'll have a week off. They'll be at home, but they'll play teams that have played them close all year. Vikings and the Packers, either one of them could play playoff spoiler and knock off the Lions, and that, I think, is the true kryptonite of the Detroit Lions in the playoffs, is their first game. If they can beat the divisional opponent, they can cruise to the Super Bowl. If they can't, we might see a different NFC North team in the Super Bowl, whether it's the Green Bay Packers or the Minnesota Vikings. Either one of them could go all the way. Packers, after that impressive win over the Seahawks, absolutely could go all the way. I'm excited about the Packers, I'm excited about the Vikings, and I'm excited to see what they can both do moving forward. And then some great teams I haven't mentioned yet. The Seahawks were on this list until they fell apart against the Packers, frankly. And the questions about Geno Smith have started to be raised about his health. The Chargers are playing incredible football. They're the 7th seed in the AFC right now. The Broncos go in this list as well. The AFC West, the Chargers, they could spring some upsets. The Broncos, they could spring some upsets. The AFC playoffs is going to be an absolute dream all the way through. The NFC, once you get through the wild card, is when it really gets fun. And then the Texans are a forgotten contender. They've clinched the AFC South. They'll be hosting a playoff game probably as the 4th seed. They've battled injury, but they're still promising. They had a lot of expectations coming into this year. They were supposed to be a Super Bowl contender, and maybe they are. But they've sort of fallen off. They can win one playoff game, maybe. I don't expect much from the Texans. I honestly haven't watched them in a while. They haven't been on primetime, right? They just haven't been a team like that. They've been that sort of lackluster 4 seed that wins a weak division. It's exactly what they're doing, winning a division that has the Colts, Titans, and Jaguars in it. Texans could be good, but really the Chargers and Broncos are the teams I'm excited about in the wild card round to potentially beat a team like the Texans and move forward, win a couple road games, and really blow the world up in the AFC. The divisional rounds and across the board, just the playoff. The AFC wildcard round is going to be a dream. The NFC divisional round is going to be unreal. The playoffs are going to be a real treat in both conferences, and we've really gotten to that point in the season where that's on our minds, and that excitement and that hope is sort of filling our hearts, where before we have that drought of football throughout the 6 months of the summer and the winter, the spring, I suppose, we're going to have some real fun football to watch and a Super Bowl champion to crown. Once those wildcard pretenders are weeded out, especially in the NFC, once the NFC West champion's out, once the NFC South champion's out, once the AFC South champion is out, the Texans, it's more than likely all Super Bowl contenders in that final 8 in that divisional round, and then conference championship games in the Super Bowl. There's going to be some mind-blowing games and some mind-blowing moments, and I cannot wait to watch it all play out. I just wish it involved the Indianapolis Colts, and unfortunately, it's not going to. That is all I have for this episode. We talked about a lot. We talked about the Colts. They lost the Broncos, and they lost their playoff hopes. They're going to lose out on this season across the board. Do changes need to be made? Maybe. We will talk a lot about that as the offseason moves forward and as we get closer to the draft. Pacers won a couple games. They won a couple big ones. Those are very, very important, and I believe they could be turning around their season as they have a very difficult end of December ahead of them. Purdue lost, but they'll be totally fine. Indiana lost. They might not be. And there's a few teams that I think could win the Super Bowl, and I think the NFL playoffs are going to be very fun regardless of if the Colts are involved in it or not.